When night falls and sound withdraws, the archive remains. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. The night does not follow all the way in. It remains outside the wall, not as an enemy and not as something rejected, simply as a larger scale that cannot pass through a smaller opening. Before the tea room, the threshold waits in a shape cut into wood and earth. It is not tall, it is not wide. The entrance offers no grand gesture, it offers a reduction. The opening is low enough that posture changes before thought does. Height becomes unnecessary, certainty becomes unnecessary. The body meets the frame first. A cool edge of wood, smoothed not by polish, but by time and repeated contact. The grain softened in the places where hands have touched it and left again. The surface is neither glossy nor rough. It holds a quiet neutrality, as if the material has learned to stop trying to impress. Passing through is not dramatic. It is a shift in scale. The world behind, with its broader distances and louder assumptions, lifts upward and away as the threshold is crossed. The room does not need to cancel the outside. It simply makes the outside irrelevant by changing the measure of what matters. Inside, the ceiling descends gently, not to confine, but to contain. It produces a kind of closeness that is not crowded. It reduces the need for long sightlines. It shortens the reach of sound. It gathers attention without tightening it. Tatami receives weight with muted softness. Woven straw, dry and steady, holds a faint scent that is neither perfume nor nostalgia. Only the remainder of grass that once moved in wind and now rests in a new arrangement. The floor does not shine. It absorbs. It offers a surface that does not return the self. No glare arrives. No bright reflection insists on presence. The door closes behind with a soft meeting of wood. The sound ends quickly, as if the room refuses to extend it into echo. Silence here is not emptiness. It has layers. It holds the small noises that occur and then removes them from distance. A shift of fabric, a slight contact of sleeve and knee, the tiniest adjustment in posture. Each appears as a brief event, then disappears without being repeated by architecture. Light does not fill this room. It gathers. It rests in corners and thins near the floor. Shadows do not rush to define edges. They settle and remain. And because they remain, the room begins to feel as though it has been waiting, not for a person, but for a certain level of quiet. The air is different here, still, but not dead. It contains subtle variation, cooler near the floor, slightly warmer nearer the ceiling, a faint thickness in the center where breath and material meet. The room is small enough that air feels like a part of the structure, not merely the space between objects. In the alcove, a scroll hangs. Ink rests against pale paper as a vertical trace. The strokes do not announce meaning. They exist as marks made by contact, brush to paper, pressure to fiber, pigment settling into texture. The room does not demand reading. It does not demand interpretation. It permits the marks to remain marks. A single stem rests in a narrow vase, not arranged to impress, only placed. Its presence is quiet and precise. The stem leans by a few degrees. The vase holds it without correction. The wall behind carries the faint texture of earth, uneven and calm. A surface that remembers its own making without calling attention to it. Nothing polished to brilliance lives here. Nothing reflects the face back to itself. The room offers no mirror. It offers proportion and pause. Breath enters, breath leaves. The walls hold their distance from one another without announcement. The small space between the near wall and the alcove post is not decoration. It is air permitted to exist as structure. The room does not fill every interval. It allows intervals to remain as intervals, and in doing so creates a kind of patience in the space itself, a waiting that does not press. A tea room is often described as minimal, but the word minimal can suggest emptiness as a style. This is not style. It is function. The reduction here is structural. Fewer objects, fewer claims, fewer surfaces that demand attention, so that attention can become slower without being pulled apart. The longer the gaze remains within this light, the more detail appears in what at first seemed plain. Wood grain becomes visible in soft gradients. Fibers within paper separate into tiny lines. The plaster wall shows minute variations in tone, small changes that do not form a pattern but still exist as evidence of material. The room does not become richer by adding. It becomes richer by allowing time to reveal what was already there. Shadow becomes an object in its own right. The stem casts its shadow before the flower seems fully present. The shadow touches the wall first, then lengthens downward, then softens at the edge where the wall's texture interrupts it. The outline trembles faintly, not from wind perhaps, but from the quiet instability of perception in low light, from tiny changes in how the eye adjusts and readjusts. Nothing in the room corrects it. Nothing insists that the shadow be symmetrical, or that it hold its shape. The room favors suggestion. It allows edges to blur without collapse. The vase is not centered. The lip curves almost evenly, almost. A small irregularity bends the circle. The deviation is not hidden. It is not apologized for. It is simply there, as the hand that shaped it is there, not visible as narrative but present as consequence. Nearby, a bowl rests. Its rim is uneven, a subtle rise on one side, a dip on the other. The glaze contains tiny fractures that catch dimness rather than light. Imperfections gather like constellations, neither random nor ordered, simply present as the surface's history. Here, imperfection does not function as Wabi explained. It functions as physics. The material cooled, the glaze contracted, the surface recorded the process. The room permits these traces to remain visible. It does not seek the brightness of completion. The longer the room is observed, the less there is to name. Not because the room becomes vague, but because naming becomes unnecessary. The objects do not require titles to exist. Their relations become enough. Stem against wall, ink against paper, shadow against plaster, ceramic against straw. Light and darkness are not enemies here. They rest together. Gradations replace contrasts. The eyes strain less because nothing is bright enough to demand focus. No glare arrives to pull attention outward. The room is not trying to win attention. It is trying to hold it gently without pressure. The tatami beneath holds a memory of many such evenings without displaying it. Its surface does not record footsteps as marks. It records them as a gradual evening of texture, a slow smoothing that occurs across years rather than hours. What feels, even to the touch, was once more varied. Repetition has made it continuous without making it uniform. The difference is small and precise, not flat, but settled. The scroll in the alcove does not move, yet the relation between its ink and the surrounding paper changes as light shifts. Darker tones in the brushwork become less distinct from shadow. The mark that seemed bold now recedes into suggestion. The wall receives both, the mark in its receding without preference. Stillness here is not fixed. It is a sustained openness to small alteration. A slight breath of air from somewhere unknown causes the stem to incline by a fraction, then return. The vase receives the motion and releases it. Nothing falls, nothing is disturbed. The room absorbs the event the way it absorbs all events, completely, without remainder. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. In this environment, the distinction between being observed and being alone becomes less important. The room does not watch. The room contains. The act of being contained reduces the need to perform. A smaller posture feels natural, not imposed. Scale shapes behavior without instruction. Outside, weather may exist. Wind, distant traffic, a broad night stretched over a city. Inside, those phenomena become irrelevant. The room does not fight them. It simply removes the distance required to think about them. The world outside belongs to a larger body. This space belongs to a smaller measure, one that does not require the same defenses. Even time behaves differently here, not because it changes, but because fewer events compete for attention. When attention is not split, the sense of hurry weakens, not as a moral improvement, as a simple outcome of reduction. The alcove holds more shadow than light, yet it does not feel obscure. It feels deliberate, as though clarity was never the intention. The room does not promise understanding. It promises containment. At first, the sound is almost nothing, so faint it might be mistaken for memory. A low, continuous murmur beneath stillness. It appears, vanishes, then returns with the consistency of something physical rather than imagined. The iron kettle rests above quiet embers. Within it, warmth gathers. The sound does not rush. It does not boil over. It hums. A narrow current moving in a hidden circle. Water brushing against iron. Iron conducting heat inward and outward at the same time. The kettle holds a small storm without spectacle. A thin ribbon of steam rises, barely visible in the dimness. It dissolves before reaching the ceiling. It does not announce itself with dramatic clouds. It simply appears and disperses, a brief change in the air's density. The room receives it without comment. The embers beneath release small pulses of heat, not flame. A faint glow that brightens, then dims, breathing in its own slow cycle. The kettle answers with a soft change in tone, a hollow resonance that appears for a moment, then settles back into the low current. The room absorbs each small sound quickly. Nothing lingers long enough to become echo. The air does not carry sound far. It keeps it local, close to its source, as if distance has lost the right to spread information. The murmur persists. It is steady and unconcerned with any rhythm outside itself. It does not match breath. It does not invite matching. It simply continues as a condition. Here, the space between tones becomes noticeable. Not a void, but a structure. The interval is the field in which the next tone becomes perceptible. Without the pause, the sound would be a blur. Without space, no tone would be distinct from itself. Heat changes the room in ways that are not dramatic but are precise. Air becomes slightly denser above the embers. The floor feels warmer near the hearth. Steam drifts, dissolves, returns in another thin thread. The skin detects these small shifts before thought can label them. The kettle sound swells slightly, then recedes, a tide within iron. The water is not yet fully awake, not yet erupting into boil. It remains in becoming. The room favors this state, process without climax. In older contexts, tea sharpened attention. It kept eyes open through long hours of reading and study. Here, the sound does something else. It loosens the edges of thought, not by persuasion, not by instruction, but by offering a steady, low-frequency continuity that the mind can rest against without needing to interpret. A small click comes from the charcoal below, brief, dry, then gone. The room accepts it and ends it. The murmur returns. The intervals widen. The pattern is subtle but consistent. Sound, pause, sound, pause. The mind begins to settle into the spacing as much as into the sound itself. For a moment, it becomes difficult to tell where the murmur is located. It is clearly in the room, and yet it also seems to be inside the body's own quiet. The boundary between outer sound and inner thought blurs, not as metaphor, but as a feature of sustained, low, continuous tone, meeting a receptive atmosphere. The kettle does not demand attention. It rewards it by being stable. Stability becomes a kind of softness. Breath enters, breath leaves. The iron holds its temperature steadily, neither rising nor falling quickly. Iron is slow to change because its mass distributes heat across a wide interior. What was placed over embers an hour ago still carries that warmth, still releases it gradually into the surrounding air. The kettle does not hurry to cool. It does not hurry to heat. It moves at the pace of its own material, and the room does not ask it to be otherwise. The steam that rose and dissolved has left no visible trace. Yet the air is fractionally more humid near the kettle than near the wall. This difference is not visible. It is only knowable by contact, by the skin's reading of what the eye cannot confirm. The room contains many such differences, slight, consistent, legible only through sustained attention or through the body's quiet measurement. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. The steam rises again, a pale thread that dissolves into dark. The embers glow, then fade, then glow again. No flame seeks attention. Everything here moves toward quiet, even when it is active. Even when water moves, it moves inward. Later, a bowl is placed. The movement may not be seen clearly. Only the arrival registers. Ceramic meeting tatami with a soft, grounded sound. The bowl does not announce itself as precious. It is an object warm, uneven, holding what it holds for a limited time. The surface of the bowl carries the hand that shaped it without displaying the hand as story. The rim is not perfectly round. The glaze reflects almost nothing. It refuses to mirror. Instead, it holds dimness within itself, a muted sheen that does not return the face. Steam rises faintly. Its presence touches skin before the eyes register it. Warmth travels into the palms and up the wrists as the bowl is held. The heat is neither aggressive nor weak. It is simply present, moving along the simplest path from warm ceramic to cooler skin. Tea meets the mouth without drama. Not sharp, not sweet, present. Heat travels downward in a quiet line. The room does not change. The kettle continues its low current. The embers continue their slow cycle. The only change is gradual. Warmth spreading, then stabilizing, then beginning to fade. The bowl becomes lighter with each sip. not symbolically, physically. Mass remains, but content decreases. A small emptiness appears inside the form. The bowl's purpose shifts from holding tea to holding warmth, then from holding warmth to holding only its own shape. There is no peak moment, no announcement that the tea is complete. The act ends by diminishing. Steam thins. The last warmth leaves slowly, and because it leaves slowly, it can be noticed. The ceramic between the palms has cooled to a temperature that no longer transfers. It has reached equilibrium with the hands that hold it. Heat exchange ceases not because warmth is gone, but because difference is gone. The bowl and the skin arrive at the same condition. Contact continues, but exchange stops. This is not emptiness. It is completion of a process. The room remains proportion: alcove, shadow, scroll, stem, vase. The kettle's murmur becomes less distinct, not because it has stopped, but because attention no longer reaches outward for it. The sound merges with the air. The air merges with stillness. Outside, the world continues, but the room does not need to reject it. Scale remains reduced. Distance remains shortened. The larger body of night stays outside the wall, not defeated, simply unnecessary. The bowl rests again on the tatami. Ceramic cools gradually. The cooling is slow enough to be felt as a process. Warmth leaving the surface returning to the room's temperature, the object becoming quiet in the most literal sense. Where the bowl rests, the tatami holds a faint warmth for a moment after. Then that too dissipates. The woven surface returns to the room's temperature without announcement. Nothing marks the place where warmth was. Nothing holds the event as visible trace. The room absorbs it the way it absorbs all things, completely, without display. The scroll continues to hang. The stem continues to lean. The plaster wall continues to hold its uneven surface. These have not changed. What has changed is smaller than change. Attention has moved through them and arrived at something less distinct than focus, a state in which the room is present but not being actively read. Breath enters, breath leaves. The embers dim further. Their glow no longer brightens. It only fades by degrees too small to isolate. The kettle's sound has become so continuous that silence and murmur can no longer be separated. They have merged into a single condition. The room at rest, active in small ways, still in larger ones. The threshold that required reduction at entry does not demand an exit. The room does not hold. It releases by not holding. What entered with the body, urgency, breadth, the need for distance, has not been expelled. It has simply found nothing here to sustain it, and so it has thinned, the way steam thins before it disappears. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. The tea is gone. The warmth diminishes. The sound becomes air. The air becomes stillness. The room remains small, deliberate, sufficient, without asking for anything more.